The snow burned against Sadie Miller's legs as she crashed through the drifts, her nightgown soaked through and clinging to her skin like ice. But the terror pumping through her veins kept her moving when everything else told her to fall down and surrender to the cold that was surely better than what waited behind her in that cabin. She could hear Marcus shouting somewhere in the distance, his voice carrying across the frozen wilderness like the howl of something predatory and unnatural. And she knew that if he caught her this time, there would be no talking her way out of it, no promising to be better or quieter or more obedient. The winter of 1884 had descended on the Colorado mountains with a vengeance, and Victor was buried under more snow than anyone could remember in recent years. But Sadie would rather freeze to death in these woods than spend another hour under the same roof as the man she had foolishly married 6 months ago. Her bare feet had gone numb after the first 100 yards, which was probably a mercy because she could feel the cuts and scrapes even through the numbness, could feel the way her toes caught on hidden roots and rocks beneath the powder. The forest was dark, despite the snow's reflection of moonlight, the pine trees creating shadows that seemed to reach for her as she stumbled between them. She had no plan beyond getting away, no destination in mind except anywhere that Marcus was not. The mining town of Victor sat in a valley surrounded by peaks that reached toward heaven, and right now Sadie felt like she was running through hell itself despite the cold. Her lungs burned with each gasping breath, the freezing air like knives in her chest. She had grown up in Denver, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a clerk, and had met Marcus Whitley at a church social where he had seemed charming and successful with his talk of the silver mine he managed near Victor. He had courted her properly, brought her flowers, spoken kindly to her parents, and she had thought herself lucky when he proposed after only 2 months. Her parents had been thrilled that their 21-year-old daughter had found such a good match, a man of 30 with prospects and property. Nobody had known what he kept hidden behind that handsome face and those smooth words. The first time he hit her had been 3 weeks after the wedding. She had burned the roast, a simple mistake born of unfamiliarity with the wood stove in their cabin, and his fist had caught her across the face before she even saw it coming. He had apologized afterward, had cried and begged her forgiveness, had sworn it would never happen again. She had believed him because she wanted to believe him, because the alternative was admitting she had made a terrible mistake. But it happened again 2 days later, and then again and again, until Sadie learned to anticipate the shift in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw that meant violence was coming. She learned to move quickly, to stay quiet, to make herself small and unnoticeable. She learned that there was no right way to behave, nothing she could do that would keep her safe, because Marcus did not hit her because of anything she did, but because of something broken inside him that needed to hurt something weaker. Tonight had been the worst. He had come home drunk from the saloon, angry about something at the mine, and when she had asked him if he wanted supper, he had grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall hard enough that she saw stars. She could still feel the ghost of his fingers around her neck, could still hear his voice hissing that he should just kill her and be done with it, that nobody would even miss a stupid, useless woman like her. When he had finally let her go, she had collapsed to the floor gasping, and he had turned away to pour himself another drink. That was when she had seen her chance. He had left the front door unlatched, too drunk and angry to notice, and she had gathered every ounce of courage she possessed and bolted. She had not stopped to grab shoes or a coat or anything else. She had simply run out into the night in nothing but her thin nightgown, driven by pure animal instinct to escape. The snow had been a shock, waist deep in the drifts, but she had plunged through it anyway, driven by a fear stronger than cold or pain or common sense. Now she had been running for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 or 20 minutes, and she could no longer hear Marcus shouting. That should have been a relief, but instead it filled her with a different kind of dread. Had he given up? That did not seem like Marcus. More likely he had gone back for his coat and boots and was now tracking her properly, following her trail through the snow with the patience of a hunter who knew his prey was already exhausted. Sadie's foot caught on something, and she went down hard, her hands plunging into the snow up to her elbows. She lay there for a moment, gasping and shaking, and felt the dangerous whisper of surrender creeping through her mind. It would be so easy to just stay here, to let the cold take her, to drift off into sleep and never wake up. At least that way Marcus could never hurt her again. No, the thought came fierce and hot, cutting through the fog of cold and exhaustion. No, she would not give him that. She would not let him be the reason she died. She had survived 21 years before meeting him, and she would survive this too. Somehow. She pushed herself back to her feet, swaying dangerously, and forced herself to keep moving. The trees seemed endless, a maze of dark trunks and darker shadows, and she had no idea if she was moving in a straight line or circling back toward the cabin. Her sense of direction had abandoned her, along with the feeling in her extremities. She could no longer feel her hands or feet, could no longer feel the cuts on her face where branches had whipped against her skin. Everything was going numb and distant, and some part of her recognized that as a very bad sign. Then she saw light through the trees ahead. Warm, flickering light that could only mean a fire, which meant a dwelling, which meant people. Hope flared in her chest, painful in its intensity, and she staggered toward it with renewed desperation. She did not care who lived out here in the wilderness. She would throw herself on their mercy, beg for help, offer anything they wanted if they would just keep her safe from Marcus. Even if they turned her away, even if they sent her back to her husband, as the law would likely require them to do, at least she would have tried. The trees opened up into a small clearing, and Sadie saw a cabin that was larger and sturdier than the one she had fled from. Smoke rose from the chimney, and light glowed in the windows, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She stumbled forward, fell against the door, and managed to raise one numb fist to pound against the wood. "Please," she tried to say, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Her throat was still damaged from Marcus's hands. She pounded on the door again, harder this time, desperation giving her strength. "Please help me." The door swung open so suddenly that she nearly fell inside. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, backlit by the fire so that she could not make out his features. For one terrible moment, she thought it was Marcus somehow, that he had gotten ahead of her and was waiting. But then the man spoke, and his voice was nothing like her husband's. "Good God," he said, and his voice was rough but not unkind, deep and textured like well-worn leather. "Come in, quickly." Strong hands caught her before she could fall, and then she was being pulled inside into blissful warmth that hurt almost as much as the cold had. The door shut behind her, cutting off the wind, and she found herself being guided toward the fire. The man was saying something, but she could not make out the words over the roaring in her ears. Her vision was going dark around the edges, and she felt her legs give out entirely. The last thing she was aware of before unconsciousness claimed her was being lifted easily in strong arms, and a voice saying, "I have got you. You are safe now." When Sadie woke, she was warm for the first time in what felt like forever. She was lying on something soft under heavy blankets, and a fire crackled somewhere nearby. For one blissful moment, she did not remember anything, and then it all came crashing back, and she sat up with a gasp, her heart hammering. "Easy," that same rough voice said from nearby. "You are all right. Nobody is going to hurt you here." Sadie's eyes darted around the cabin's interior. It was a single large room, well-built and tidy, with a stone fireplace on one wall and simple but sturdy furniture throughout. She was lying on a bed in the corner, and sitting in a chair beside the fire was the man who had answered the door. She could see him properly now in the lamplight. He looked to be somewhere in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell past his collar and needed a cut, and a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard. His eyes were startling in their intensity, a pale gray blue that seemed to see right through her, and his face had the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. He wore simple clothes, dark trousers, and a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. There was a gentleness in his expression that did not quite match the rough exterior, a concern that made Sadie's eyes suddenly sting with tears. "Where am I?" she managed to whisper. Her throat felt raw and speaking hurt. About 2 miles northwest of Victor, the man said. My name is Yates Mackenzie. I ranch out here, mostly cattle with some horses. You are safe here, miss. Can you tell me your name? Sadie, she said, then hesitated. Her married name felt like poison on her tongue. Sadie Miller. If Yates noticed the pause or the choice to use what was presumably her maiden name, he did not comment on it. Can you tell me what happened? You came to my door half frozen in a nightgown in the middle of a blizzard. Someone hurt you. It was not a question. Sadie's hand went unconsciously to her throat, where she could feel the tenderness of bruises forming. She looked down at her hands, now pink with returning circulation instead of the terrible white they had been. Someone had wrapped her feet in clean bandages. She was still wearing her nightgown, but someone had piled blankets on top of her, proper wool blankets that held heat. My husband, she whispered finally. I had to get away from him. Yates's expression did not change, but something flickered in those pale eyes. Something hard and cold. Did he do that to your neck? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Is he likely to come looking for you? The question made fear spike through her chest again. Yes, she said. He will come. He will be angry. Maybe you should send me away before he gets here. I do not want to bring trouble to you. You are not going anywhere, Yates said firmly. Not in this storm and not in your condition. Your feet are badly cut and you are half frozen. It will be days before you can walk properly. He stood, moving to a cabinet where he pulled out a tin cup. He ladled something from a pot hanging over the fire and brought the cup to her. Drink this. It is just broth, but it will help warm you from the inside. Sadie took the cup with shaking hands and sipped. The broth was rich and salty and absolutely delicious, and she realized she could not remember the last time she had eaten. Marcus had not let her have any supper before he started in on her. She drank the whole cup in long gulps, feeling warmth spread through her chest and stomach. Yates took the empty cup from her and refilled it without comment. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning, I think, she admitted. He nodded and moved to the stove, where he began slicing bread and cheese. He brought her a plate with several thick slices of both, and she ate ravenously despite her damaged throat making swallowing painful. He let her eat in silence, just sat back down in his chair and watched the fire, giving her space to collect herself. When she had finished eating, Sadie finally found the courage to ask, Why are you helping me? You do not know me. For all you know, I am lying about everything. Yates turned those startling eyes on her. I do not think you are lying. I can see the bruises forming on your neck and face, and your wrists have marks that look like fingers. I can see that you were terrified enough to run out into a blizzard with no shoes or coat. Whatever happened to you, whatever you were running from, was worse than the thought of freezing to death. He paused, then added quietly, Nobody deserves that kind of fear. Something in Sadie's chest cracked open at those words, at the simple kindness in them, and before she could stop herself, she was crying. Great heaving sobs that hurt her throat and her ribs and made her whole body shake. She had not cried once during the 6 months of her marriage, had kept everything locked down tight because crying only made Marcus angrier, but now she could not seem to stop. All the fear and pain and desperation came pouring out in an ugly, unstoppable flood. She expected Yates to be uncomfortable with her tears, to tell her to stop or to leave her alone until she composed herself. But he did neither. He simply moved closer and handed her a clean handkerchief, then sat quietly while she cried herself out. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups and gasps, he spoke gently. You can stay here as long as you need to, he said. Storm is supposed to last another 2 or 3 days according to the signs. After that, we will figure out what comes next. But right now, you need to rest and heal. Do not worry about anything else. But Marcus, she started to protest. Will have to go through me if he wants to get to you, Yates interrupted, and there was steel in his voice now. And I promise you, that will not be easy for him. Sadie wanted to argue. wanted to warn him that Marcus was dangerous, that he would not hesitate to hurt anyone who got in his way. But exhaustion was pulling at her like a riptide, and the warmth and food and safety were making it impossible to keep her eyes open. She felt herself sliding back down under the blankets, felt sleep rising up to claim her. "Thank you," she whispered just before darkness took her. "Thank you." When she woke again, pale gray light was filtering through the windows. The storm was still raging outside, snow battering against the glass and wind howling around the cabin's corners. The fire had been built up, and the cabin was warm and comfortable. Yates was standing at the stove with his back to her, doing something that involved the clatter of pots and the smell of coffee and bacon. Sadie lay still for a moment, disoriented by the simple domesticity of the scene. When was the last time she had woken up without fear? When was the last time the first thing she heard in the morning had not been Marcus's anger or demands? "You are awake," Yates said without turning around. "How do you feel?" Sadie took inventory of her body. Everything hurt, but it was a distant hurt, nothing like the sharp terror pain of last night. "Sore," she admitted. "But better. Good." He turned, holding a plate. "You need to eat. Keep your strength up." He brought her breakfast, bacon and eggs and more bread, with a cup of hot coffee that was so strong it nearly made her eyes water. Sadie sat up carefully, keeping the blankets wrapped around herself for modesty, and ate. The food was simple but well cooked, and she found herself eating every bite despite the lingering pain in her throat. Yates settled back in his chair with his own plate and coffee. In the daylight, Sadie could see more details about the cabin. It was clearly the home of a man who lived alone but took pride in his space. Everything was clean and well maintained. Tools hung neatly on the walls, books stacked on a shelf near the bed. There was a door that presumably led to another room, maybe a storage area or a room for working. A rifle hung above the door, and she saw a gun belt hanging on a hook near the entrance. The sight of the weapons should have made her nervous after months of living with Marcus's violence, but somehow they did not. Yates wore his strength like a well-fitted coat, comfortable and unassuming. There was no threat in him, at least not toward her. "How long have you lived out here?" she asked, more to break the silence than anything. 5 years, Yates said. "Built this cabin myself. Bought the land from the territory when I first came out from Montana. I run about 200 head of cattle and maybe 30 horses. It is a good life, quiet." He paused, then added, "Lonely sometimes, but good." "You are from Montana?" He nodded. "My father had a ranch up there. I worked it until he died 3 years ago, then sold it and came south. Too many memories." There was a weight to those last words, a story he was not telling, and Sadie understood about things too painful to speak of. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the storm continuing its assault outside. Finally, Sadie said, "You should know the truth about Marcus, about what he might do." Yates looked at her steadily. "Tell me what you want to tell me." So she did. Haltingly at first, then with more confidence, Sadie told him everything. About the courtship and the wedding, about the first time Marcus hit her and all the times after. About learning to read his moods, about the constant fear, about the terrible isolation of living with someone who made you feel like you deserved the pain, about last night, about his hands on her throat and his words about killing her, about running into the snow and being more afraid of him than of dying in the wilderness. Yates listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she talked, but his voice remaining calm when he finally spoke. "He will not touch you again. I give you my word on that." "You do not understand," Sadie said urgently. "Marcus is not a good man. He has friends, men who work at the mine. He has money and influence in Victor. If he comes here, if he demands that you return his wife to him, the law will be on his side. I belong to him legally. No one will help me against him." "The law might say you belong to him," Yates said quietly. "But I have never put much stock in laws that protect men who hurt women. You are a person, not property. and you have the right to be safe. That matters more to me than what some piece of paper says." Sadie felt tears prick her eyes again at those words. In 6 months of marriage, Marcus had never once spoken to her with the basic respect that this stranger was showing her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Yates was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough with old pain. "My mother was married to a man like your husband. My real father, the man who gave me life. He was a drunk and mean with it, and he took it out on her for years. I was too young to stop it, just a boy watching his mother get beaten and not understanding why nobody would help us. She finally left him when I was 8, took me and ran in the middle of the night, just like you did. We were lucky. We made it to the next town over and she found work, and eventually she met my stepfather, the man who raised me and gave me his name. He was a good man, everything my birth father was not. He showed me what a man should be." He turned to look at Sadie, and his eyes were fierce with conviction. "My mother died 5 years ago, peacefully, in her sleep, surrounded by people who loved her. But it could have gone differently. If she had not found the courage to run, if she had not found someone willing to help her, I might have grown up watching her die at my father's hands. So when I say I will protect you, I mean it. I owe that to her memory, and I owe it to you as a human being who deserves safety." Sadie could not speak past the lump in her throat. She just nodded, wiping at her eyes with the handkerchief he had given her the night before. After a moment, she managed to say, "Your mother was lucky to have you." "I was lucky to have her," Yates corrected gently, "and the stepfather who taught me how to be a man worth respecting. Now, you should rest more. Your body has been through a lot, and healing takes time." Sadie did feel exhaustion pulling at her again, despite having just woken. The warmth and safety of the cabin, the full stomach, and the emotional release of finally telling someone the truth all combined to make her feel heavy and slow. She slid back down under the blankets, her eyes already closing. "Will you wake me if Marcus comes?" she asked sleepily. "He will not get past the door," Yates promised. "Sleep easy." She did sleep, deeper and more peacefully than she had in 6 months. When she woke again, it was afternoon, the storm still howling outside, but the cabin warm and secure. Yates was reading a book by the fire, his stockinged feet propped up on a stool. He looked up when she stirred. "Feel better?" "Yes," Sadie said, and was surprised to realize it was true. Her body still ached, but the bone-deep exhaustion had eased. "I should get up. I have been useless, just lying here while you wait on me." "You are recovering from trauma and exposure," Yates said firmly. "That is not useless, that is necessary. But if you feel up to sitting by the fire, I can help you over there. Your feet should not bear weight yet." He came over and offered his arm, and Sadie took it, letting him help her stand. Her legs trembled but held, and with his support, she made it to the chair by the fire. He had set out a clean shirt of his for her to put on over her nightgown, long enough to serve as a dress, and thick socks for her bandaged feet. She was grateful for the extra coverage and warmth. Once she was settled, Yates brought her coffee, and they sat together in companionable silence. After a while, Sadie said, "Tell me about your ranch. What is it like when it is not buried in snow?" So Yates talked, and Sadie listened. He told her about the work of ranching, the long days and hard labor and constant vigilance against weather and predators and simple bad luck. He told her about his favorite horse, a bay mare named Copper, who was smart as a whip and twice as stubborn. He told her about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, of watching cattle fatten on good grass, of the way the mountains looked at sunrise. There was poetry in the way he talked about the land, a deep love that went beyond simple ownership. This was not just his property, it was his home in the truest sense of the word. Sadie found herself relaxing as he talked, found herself smiling at his stories about Copper's antics, or the time a bull got loose and led him on a chase through the foothills. It felt strange to smile, like a muscle she had forgotten how to use, but it also felt good, like coming back to life after a long, cold sleep. The afternoon faded into evening, and Yates made them a simple supper of beans and cornbread. They ate together, and Sadie insisted on helping with the dishes despite his protests. It felt good to do something useful, to have purpose beyond simply surviving. As she washed and he dried, she was struck by how domestic the scene was, how normal. This was what a partnership should look like, she realized. Two people working together, neither one dominating or demanding, just the easy cooperation of equals. That night, Yates insisted she keep the bed while he made himself comfortable on the floor near the fire, with blankets and a bedroll. Sadie protested, but he was immovable on the subject, and she was still too tired and sore to argue much. She lay in the darkness listening to the storm and the quiet sounds of another person breathing, and felt safer than she had in months. The storm continued through the next day and into the one after that. Sadie grew stronger, able to walk short distances on her healing feet, able to help with more of the cabin's daily tasks. She and Yates fell into an easy rhythm, cooking and cleaning and talking together. He was a good listener, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention, and a good storyteller with a dry wit that surprised her into laughter more than once. Sadie found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, not just about Marcus, but about her life before, about her childhood, and her parents, and her dreams that had gotten lost somewhere along the way. "I wanted to be a teacher," she admitted on the second full day of the storm. They were sitting by the fire again, Sadie mending a shirt for Yates while he worked on repairing a bridle. "Like my father, I loved learning, loved books and ideas. But my mother said that was just for before I married, that after I had a husband, I would have better things to do than fill children's heads with lessons." "Your mother was wrong," Yates said bluntly. "Learning is never wasted, and teaching is one of the most important things a person can do. My stepfather never learned to read until he married my mother. She taught him patient as anything, sitting at the kitchen table every night after supper. He always said it opened up the world for him." He paused, then added, "You could still teach, after all this is sorted out. There is always need for teachers out here." "After all this is sorted out," Sadie repeated quietly. "You say that like you think it is possible. Like I might actually have an after." Yates looked at her seriously. "You will have an after. I promise you that. However this ends, you will have a life beyond Marcus Whitley. You deserve that." Sadie wanted to believe him, but she knew Marcus, knew his pride and his possessiveness. He would never just let her go. The thought of what was coming when the storm ended sat heavy in her chest like a stone. On the third day, the storm finally began to break. The wind died down, and the snow tapered off to occasional flurries. Yates went out to check on his animals in the barn and came back reporting that all the cattle and horses had weathered the storm well. He also reported that the snow was piled higher than he had ever seen it, drifts 6 and 7 feet tall in places. It would be at least another day before the roads were passable. That reprieve ended late in the afternoon when they heard the sound of horses outside. Sadie's blood turned to ice. She knew, even before Yates went to the window, who it would be. "3 men," Yates said quietly. "One of them matches the description you gave me of your husband. They are armed." Sadie's hands were shaking. She clasped them together tight, nails digging into her palms. "What do we do?" Yates took down the rifle from above the door and checked that it was loaded. Then he turned to her, his expression calm and determined. "You stay away from the door and the windows. Let me handle this. Remember, they cannot take you if you do not want to go. You have a choice here." "The law says I do not have a choice," Sadie whispered. "Then we will worry about the law after we worry about keeping you safe," Yates said firmly. He moved to the door just as heavy fists began pounding on it. "Open up! Marcus's voice shouted from outside. I know my wife is in there. Send her out now and there will not be any trouble. Yates opened the door just wide enough to stand in the gap, the rifle held casually but ready. Can I help you, gentlemen? Sadie could not see Marcus from where she stood pressed against the back wall, but she could hear him clearly. You have got my wife in there. Sadie Miller Whitley. She ran off a few nights ago, not right in the head. I have come to take her home where she belongs. The lady is here, Yates agreed calmly, and she is staying here until she decides otherwise. She is hurt and healing, and she is not going anywhere she does not want to go. She is my wife, Marcus snarled. You have got no right to keep her from me. The law says she belongs to me. The law says a lot of things, Yates said, and there was steel in his voice now. It also says a man is not supposed to beat his wife near to death and try to strangle her. Mrs. Whitley has bruises around her throat in the shape of fingers. She has cuts all over her feet from running through the snow with no shoes. She was half frozen when she got here. You did that to her, and now you want me to hand her back so you can finish the job? That is between me and my wife, Marcus said. Not your concern. Now send her out before this gets ugly. It is already ugly, Yates said flatly. You have beat a woman who trusted you, terrorized her so badly she would rather die in a blizzard than stay with you. That is about as ugly as things get. She is not going with you. Now get off my property before I make you leave. You are making a big mistake, Marcus said, and his voice had gone low and dangerous in a way that made Sadie's stomach turn. She knew that tone. That was the tone that came before violence. I brought friends. You are just one man. Hand her over, and we will leave peacefully. Otherwise, we will take her by force, and you will be the one who ends up hurt. You are welcome to try, Yates said calmly. But I should warn you that I am a very good shot, and from here I cannot miss. You might get me eventually, 3 against 1, but I will take at least one of you down before I go, and my bet is it will be you. Is your pride really worth dying over? There was a long silence. Sadie held her breath, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Then Marcus spoke again, and she could hear the fury in his voice barely held in check. This is not over. She is legally my wife. I will go to the marshal, get the law involved. They will make you give her back. You do that, Yates said, but until they show up with a court order, she stays here. And if I were you, I would think real careful about whether you want the law looking too close at what you have been doing to your wife. Judges might have to follow the letter of the law about marriage, but they do not much like men who beat women. Neither do marshals. You really want them asking questions about how Mrs. Whitley ended up running through a blizzard in her nightgown? Another long silence. Then the sound of horses moving, voices conferring too low for Sadie to make out the words. Finally, Marcus called out one more time. I will be back, Sadie. You are my wife and you are coming home. This cowboy cannot protect you forever. That sounds like a threat, Yates said mildly. I do not take kindly to threats on my property. I suggest you leave now while you still can. The sound of hoofbeats retreated, and after a long moment, Yates closed the door and bolted it. He turned to find Sadie collapsed in the chair, shaking all over. He set the rifle aside and knelt beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Breathe, he said quietly. You are all right. He is gone. For now, Sadie gasped. He will be back. He meant what he said. He will go to the marshal, and they will make me go back to him. The law is on his side. Maybe, Yates admitted. But maybe not. There are ways around the law if we are smart about it. At her questioning look, he continued, a marshal is not going to force a woman to go back to a man who tried to kill her, not without a judge's order. And getting a judge's order takes time. In that time, a lot of things can happen. You could travel somewhere else, somewhere out of the territory where the marriage is not recognized. Or you could file for divorce, claim abandonment, or cruelty. Divorce, Sadie said bitterly. Do you know how impossible that is for a woman to get? I would need to prove cruelty in court, would need witnesses and evidence. I would need money for a lawyer. And even if I got all that, everyone would know. I would be ruined, unmarriageable. My parents would be shamed. Would that be worse than going back to him? Yates asked gently. Sadie thought about that, thought about Marcus's hands around her throat, about the look in his eyes that said he wanted her dead, thought about living every day in fear, about having that fear be her entire existence. No, she whispered. Nothing could be worse than that. Then we figure it out, Yates said firmly. Together. You are not alone in this anymore. Sadie looked at him, this man who had taken her in without question, who had protected her from her husband, who had promised to help her find a way forward. She barely knew him, but she trusted him more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. Why are you doing this? She asked. You could just send me away. Tell Marcus you do not want the trouble. Why are you helping me? Yates was quiet for a moment, his gray-blue eyes searching her face. Because it is the right thing to do, he said finally, and because I look at you and I see someone brave and strong who deserves better than what she has gotten. You ran into a blizzard rather than accept more abuse. That takes courage. You survived. That takes strength. Now you are here, and I have the means to help. So I am going to help. It is that simple. It was not simple, Sadie knew. Nothing about this situation was simple, but the way Yates said it made it sound possible, made it sound like maybe there could be a way through the darkness ahead. She found herself wanting to believe him. That night, neither of them slept well. Yates kept the rifle close and woke at every small sound. Sadie lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of horses returning. But the night passed quietly, and dawn came cold and clear, the storm's aftermath glittering in the sunshine. After breakfast, Yates said, I need to ride into Victor today. Check on my herd and also see what the situation is with the marshal. Better to know what we are dealing with than wait for it to come to us. Sadie felt fear clutch at her chest. What if Marcus is waiting for you? What if he tries to hurt you? He will not catch me by surprise, Yates assured her, and I need to do this. You should stay here. Keep the door bolted. I will be back before dark. Sadie did not want him to go, but she understood the necessity. She watched from the window as he saddled Copper, the bay mare dancing eagerly after days cooped up in the barn. Yates looked back once before riding away, his expression serious, and then he was gone, and Sadie was alone. The day dragged interminably. Sadie tried to keep busy, washing their dishes and tidying the already tidy cabin, but mostly she just worried. What if Marcus ambushed Yates on the road? What if the marshal arrested Yates for harboring her? What if Yates decided the trouble was not worth it and came back to tell her she had to leave? That last fear was perhaps the most irrational, given everything Yates had already done for her. But fear was not rational. Fear was the lesson Marcus had taught her over 6 months of marriage, the constant expectation that safety was temporary and pain was inevitable. It was nearly dark when she heard the sound of a horse returning. Sadie peered out the window, her heart in her throat, and nearly collapsed with relief when she saw it was Yates, alone and apparently unharmed. She unbolted the door and let him in, searching his face for answers. What happened? What did you learn? Yates hung up his coat and gun belt before answering. Marcus did go to the marshal like he said he would. Marshal Thompson is a decent man, but he is caught between the law and what is right. The law says you are Marcus's wife and should be returned to him, but Thompson is not stupid. He saw the bruises on your throat when Marcus dragged him out to the cabin to show him you had run off. He knows what kind of man Marcus is. So what does that mean for us? It means Thompson gave Marcus a choice, Yates said. Either Marcus could file a formal complaint and have the law investigate the whole situation, which would mean explaining to a judge exactly what happened the night you ran, why you were so desperate to escape. Or Marcus could accept that you had left him and let it go quietly. No legal fuss, no scandal, just a quiet separation. And Marcus chose to let it go? Sadie asked incredulously. That does not sound like him at all. He did not want to, Yates admitted. But Thompson pointed out that if this went to court, people would talk. The whole town would know that Marcus's wife ran out into a blizzard to get away from him, that she nearly died rather than stay in his house. Men like Marcus, they care about their reputation. The idea of everyone knowing his wife hated him that much, it hit him where it hurt. So I am free. Sadie could barely let herself hope. Just like that? Not quite, Yates said carefully. Thompson said he would give Marcus a week to cool down and think about it. After that, if Marcus still insists on pressing the matter, Thompson will have to bring you in and let a judge decide. But Thompson thinks Marcus will see reason, especially if you stay out of sight for a while. Let the gossip die down. So I am still trapped? Sadie said dully. Just in a different way. No, Yates said firmly. You are free, even if Marcus does not accept it. Even if Thompson has to bring you in, you still have choices. You can testify about what he did to you. You can file for divorce on grounds of cruelty. It will be hard and it will be ugly, but you can do it. And I will be there to back up your story, to testify about the condition you were in when you got here. You are not alone, and you are not powerless. Sadie wanted to believe him, but 6 months of Marcus had taught her that she had no power, that fighting back only made things worse. The idea that she could stand up in court and accuse her husband, that anyone would believe her or care, seemed like a fantasy. But Yates was looking at her with such conviction, such absolute certainty, that she found herself nodding. All right, she whispered. All right. We wait and see what happens. And if Marcus comes back, we face it together. Together, Yates agreed. The week that followed was strange and tentative. Sadie remained at the cabin, her feet healing slowly, her bruises fading from black to purple to yellow-green. Yates went about his daily work, tending to his animals and mending fences and all the other tasks that came with ranching. Sadie helped where she could, cooking their meals and mending his clothes and keeping the cabin clean. It was domestic work, the same work she had done as Marcus's wife, but it felt entirely different. Yates thanked her for every meal, complimented her cooking, asked her opinion on things. He treated her like a partner, not a servant, and Sadie found herself relaxing in ways she had not known. She was tense. They talked more as the days passed, long conversations by the fire in the evenings. Yates told her more about his childhood, about growing up on his stepfather's ranch and learning the cattle business, about the books his mother had insisted he read, the education she had made sure he received, even living in the middle of nowhere, about his decision to come south after his parents died, looking for a fresh start without the ghosts of memory everywhere he looked. Sadie told him about Denver, about her father's stories of the students he taught, and her mother's constant worries about money and respectability, about the books she had loved, the dreams she had harbored of seeing more of the world, about meeting Marcus and how charming he had seemed, how foolish she had been to trust that charm. You were not foolish, Yates said when she called herself that. You were hopeful, and there is nothing wrong with that. He is the one who betrayed that hope. That is on him, not you. It was the first time anyone had told her it was not her fault, and Sadie found tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. Yates handed her his handkerchief, the same one he had given her that first night, and let her cry without trying to fix it or make it stop. When she was done, he just said, "You did not deserve what he did to you. I need you to know that." I am starting to believe it, Sadie admitted. It is hard after so long thinking I must have done something to deserve it, must have been wrong somehow. But being here with you, seeing how different things can be, it is helping me remember who I was before Marcus, who I could be again. Yates smiled, a slow, warm expression that transformed his usually serious face. I like who you are now, and I think the woman you become after all this is going to be someone pretty remarkable. Sadie felt warmth bloom in her chest at those words, something she had not felt in so long she barely recognized it. Hope, she realized, and maybe the first faint stirrings of something more. The week deadline came and went, with no word from Marcus or the marshal. Yates rode into Victor on the eighth day and returned with the news that Marcus had apparently accepted the separation. He had told people his wife had left him to return to her family in Denver, a story that saved his pride while letting her go. The marshal had sent word that Sadie was free to stay at the Mackenzie Ranch, and that he considered the matter closed unless Marcus changed his mind and pressed charges. "It is over," Yates told her. "You are free." Sadie could hardly believe it. Free. The word felt too big, too impossible. "What do I do now?" she asked, suddenly lost. For 6 months, her entire existence had been about surviving Marcus, and before that, about being a good daughter and making a good marriage. Now, with those structures gone, she had no idea who she was supposed to be. "Whatever you want," Yates said simply. "You can stay here as long as you need to figure it out. Or you can go back to Denver to your parents. Or you can go somewhere entirely new. The choice is yours." Sadie thought about Denver, about facing her parents and explaining that her marriage had failed, about the shame and the scandal, about becoming the subject of gossip and pity. She thought about going somewhere new, starting over as a stranger, with no past and no connections. And then she thought about staying here, in this cabin with this man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. "Could I stay?" she asked hesitantly. "Not forever, but just for a while longer, until I figure out what I want to do." "You can stay as long as you like," Yates said, and the warmth in his voice made that feeling in her chest bloom bigger. "I like having you here. Place feels more like a home with someone to share it with." So Sadie stayed. Winter deepened into February, and she settled into the rhythms of ranch life. Her feet healed, and she grew stronger, able to help with more of the work. Yates taught her to ride Copper, patient and encouraging as she learned to manage the mare's spirit. He taught her to shoot, showing her how to handle a rifle and a pistol, telling her that every person should know how to defend themselves. He treated her like she was capable and strong, and slowly Sadie began to believe it herself. They grew closer as the weeks passed, the easy friendship deepening into something more. Sadie found herself noticing things about Yates that had nothing to do with gratitude. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the rough timbre of his voice, the strength in his hands when he helped her down from Copper's back, the way he looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious and unexpected. She caught him watching her while she cooked or read by the fire, and when their eyes met, there was a heat there that had nothing to do with the fireplace. Neither of them spoke of it at first. Sadie was still too raw for Marcus, too uncertain of herself, and Yates seemed determined not to take advantage of her vulnerability. But the tension grew between them like a living thing until the air seemed to crackle whenever they were close. It came to a head on a cold night in mid-February. They had spent the day working together to repair a section of fence damaged by the weight of snow, and had come back to the cabin tired and wind-burned. Yates built up the fire while Sadie made supper, and they ate together in comfortable silence. After the dishes were done, they sat by the fire as they always did, Yates reading while Sadie worked on mending a shirt. But tonight, Sadie could not concentrate on her stitching. She kept sneaking glances at Yates, at the strong line of his jaw, and the way the firelight gilded his dark hair. She thought about the way he had caught her when she stumbled on the way back from the fence, his hands strong and steady on her waist. The way he had smiled at her, warm and slightly concerned, asking if she was all right. The way she had wanted to lean into that touch instead of stepping away. Yates looked up from his book and caught her staring. "Something on your mind?" Sadie set down her mending, her heart beating fast. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why have you never married? A man like you, with land and a good character, you could have your pick of women. Why are you out here alone?" Yates was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I was engaged once, he said finally. Back in Montana, her name was Emma. We had known each other since we were children, and everyone just assumed we would marry someday, including us. He paused, his expression distant with memory. But when my mother got sick, Emma did not want to wait. She said we should marry right away, move to town where she could have a proper house and society. She did not want to nurse my mother through her illness, did not want the inconvenience of it. I told her I could not leave my mother, that I needed to be there for her, like she had been there for me. Emma gave me an ultimatum, her or my mother. You chose your mother, Sadie said softly. I did, and Emma married someone else within 6 months. Last I heard, she was living in Seattle being a respectable town wife. Yates smiled, but it was edged with old bitterness. After that, I just did not see the point. Most women I met wanted me to be something I am not. They wanted a town man with a store or a business, someone who could give them comfort and status. They did not want a rancher who smelled like cattle and came home dirty every night. And I did not want to change who I was to make someone else happy. You should not have to, Sadie said. You are fine just as you are. Yates looked at her, and there was something intense in his gaze that made her breath catch. And what about you? Now that you are free, what do you want? Sadie set down her mending completely and met his eyes. I do not know yet. 6 months ago, I thought I wanted a good husband and a nice home and children. That was what I was supposed to want. But Marcus taught me that those things mean nothing if the person you are with does not respect you, does not treat you with basic kindness. Now, I think what I want is to be someone who does not need rescuing, someone who is strong enough to stand on her own. You are already that person, Yates said quietly. You ran into a blizzard to save yourself. You survived. You healed. You are learning to shoot and ride and take care of yourself. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. I do not feel strong, Sadie admitted. I feel like I am still figuring out who I am without Marcus defining me. But being here with you, it is helping. You make me feel like I could be that strong person. Yates stood and moved closer, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. You do not need me to be strong, but if you want me here while you figure things out, I am not going anywhere. Sadie looked at him, this good man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return, who had protected her and encouraged her and believed in her when she could not believe in herself. She thought about the way her heart beat faster when he was near, the way she felt safe and seen in a way she had never felt with Marcus. She thought about the heat in his eyes when he looked at her, the careful way he always kept a respectful distance even though she could tell he wanted to be closer. What if I want more than that? She asked softly. What if I want you to stay not just while I figure things out, but after? Yates's breath caught. Sadie, he said, and her name on his lips was rough with want and restraint. You have been through so much. I do not want to take advantage of that. I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything, or like you have to be with me because I helped you. That is not what this is, Sadie said firmly. She reached out and touched his face, feeling the rasp of his beard against her palm. I am grateful to you, yes, but this is not gratitude. This is me realizing that I feel happier here with you in this cabin than I ever felt in 6 months of marriage. This is me noticing the way you look at me when you think I am not paying attention, and the way I look for you first thing every morning. This is me wanting something for myself, not because I am supposed to want it, but because I genuinely do. What do you want? Yates asked, and his voice was barely more than a whisper. I want to kiss you, Sadie said. I want to know what it feels like to kiss a good man, someone who treats me with respect. I want to stop being afraid of wanting things. Yates searched her face for a long moment, as if making absolutely certain she meant it. Then slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was nothing like kissing Marcus had been. Marcus had always taken, demanding and rough, using her mouth like it was his right. Yates was gentle and questioning, his lips soft against hers, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with infinite care. It was a kiss that asked rather than demanded, that offered rather than took, and Sadie felt something in her chest crack open at the tenderness of it. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to his shoulders, and felt him make a low sound in his throat. He pulled her closer, careful even in his passion, and the kiss deepened. It was sweet and hot at the same time, a slow burn that made Sadie's whole body feel alive in a way she had never experienced. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted roughly. "But I was afraid you were not ready, that I would scare you." "You could never scare me," Sadie said. "You are the safest person I have ever known." She kissed him again, marveling at the freedom of it, at the fact that she could want this and take it without fear, that she could be close to a man and feel desire instead of dread. They stayed like that for a long time, trading kisses by the firelight, learning the shape and taste of each other. Yates never pushed for more, content to follow her lead, and Sadie loved him for it, even as she was not quite ready to say the words. When they finally pulled apart, flushed and breathing hard, Yates smiled at her with such warmth that Sadie felt her heart turn over in her chest. "We should probably talk about this," he said. "About what it means." "It means I am falling in love with you," Sadie said, the words coming out before she could think better of them. But once they were out, she realized they were true. Absolutely and completely true. "I know it is fast and complicated and probably foolish, but I am falling in love with you, Yates Mackenzie." Yates closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they were bright with emotion. "I am already in love with you," he said. "Have been since about the second week when you laughed at one of my stories, and I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life making you laugh like that. I know we have not known each other long, and I know you are still healing from what Marcus did to you, but I love you, Sadie Miller, and I will wait as long as you need me to wait to figure out what you want from this, from us." Sadie felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I do not want to wait," she said. "I have spent too much of my life waiting for permission to want things, to be happy. I want this. I want you. I want us." "Then you have me," Yates said simply. "For as long as you want me." "How about forever?" Sadie asked, half joking, half serious. Yates kissed her again, soft and sweet. Forever sounds just about right. They stayed up late that night, talking and kissing and planning. Yates was adamant that they do things properly, that there be no question about Sadie's freedom to choose. He wanted to court her, he said, to give her time to be sure this was what she wanted. They would wait until her marriage to Marcus was legally dissolved, which Yates would help her file for. They would make sure she had options, that she knew she could leave if she wanted to, that she was choosing him, and this life freely, and not out of obligation or gratitude. Sadie listened to his careful plans and loved him even more for them. But she also knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that she had already chosen. She had chosen the moment he opened his door to her in the middle of a blizzard. She had chosen every day since, watching him work and talk and treat her with respect. She had chosen when she kissed him, and she would keep choosing him every day for the rest of her life. Winter faded into spring, and Sadie and Yates moved forward together. With Yates's help and the testimony of Marshall Thompson, Sadie filed for divorce from Marcus on the grounds of extreme cruelty. Marcus contested it at first, but when it became clear that multiple people had seen Sadie's injuries and were willing to testify about them, he accepted a quiet settlement. The divorce was granted in April of 1884, and Sadie was finally legally free. Through it all, Yates courted her properly. He took her on rides through the mountains to see the wildflowers blooming. He bought her books from town, remembering her love of learning. He taught her more about ranching, treating her like a full partner in the operation. He introduced her to his neighbors as his intended, making it clear that she was under his protection and that anyone who had a problem with that would have to take it up with him. And every night he told her he loved her and asked her to marry him. Sadie said yes in May, on a perfect spring day with the mountains gleaming in the sunshine. They were married in June in a simple ceremony at the church in Victor, with Marshall Thompson standing as witness. Sadie wore a simple blue dress instead of white, and she carried wildflowers instead of formal roses. It was nothing like her first wedding, which had been all about appearances and propriety. This wedding was about love and commitment, and two people choosing each other freely and fully. Their wedding night was everything Marcus had taught her to fear, and nothing like she had expected. Yates was patient and tender, asking her permission for everything, making sure she felt safe and wanted. He showed her that physical intimacy could be about connection instead of control, about pleasure shared instead of pleasure taken. Sadie cried afterward, but they were healing tears, the final release of the fear and trauma Marcus had left her with. Yates held her through it, whispering that he loved her, that she was safe, that they had all the time in the world to learn each other. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Sadie helped Yates build the ranch into something prosperous, her head for numbers and planning complementing his skill with animals and land. She started teaching the children of nearby ranching families, finally fulfilling her dream of being an educator. She learned to be comfortable in her own skin, to trust her own strength, to believe that she deserved happiness. She and Yates had their first child in the spring of 1886, a boy they named William after Yates's stepfather. He was followed by a daughter named Catherine 2 years later and another son named James in 1890. Sadie raised her children to be strong and kind, to respect themselves and others. She made sure her daughter knew she could be anything she wanted to be, and that her sons understood that real strength meant protecting those weaker than yourself, not taking advantage of them. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep, and she and Yates sat together by the fire, Sadie thought about that terrible night when she ran through waist-deep snow to escape a man who wanted to destroy her. She thought about how close she had come to dying in the cold, and about the miracle of finding Yates's cabin in the darkness. She thought about how different her life might have been if that door had not opened, if those strong arms had not caught her, if that rough voice had not promised to keep her safe. "What are you thinking about?" Yates would ask, reading her expression the way he always could. "About how lucky I am," Sadie would answer, taking his hand. "About how grateful I am that I ran in the right direction that night. About how much I love you." And Yates would pull her close and kiss her temple and tell her that he was the lucky one, that finding her had been the best thing that ever happened to him, that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted running toward him through that snow. As Sadie grew older, as her children grew and eventually had children of their own, she never forgot the lessons of those dark months with Marcus or the bright ones that followed with Yates. She became known in the area as someone who would help women in trouble, who would offer a safe place to stay and practical advice about leaving dangerous situations. She and Yates opened their home more than once to women fleeing bad marriages, offering them the same shelter and protection that had saved Sadie's life. When their granddaughter asked her once about why she did that work, why she made herself a refuge for scared women, Sadie told her the truth. She told her about Marcus and the blizzard and Yates opening his door. She told her that she had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was run towards safety, even when you did not know if you would find it. And that once you found that safety, once you knew what it felt like to be truly protected and respected and loved, you had a responsibility to offer that to others when you could. "Never let anyone make you feel like you deserve to be hurt," she told her granddaughter. "Never stay with someone who makes you afraid. And never be afraid to run through whatever snow you need to get away from danger. There will always be good people willing to open their doors if you are brave enough to knock. Yates and Sadie lived long lives, dying within months of each other in 1923 after nearly 40 years of marriage. They left behind 3 children, 12 grandchildren, and a legacy of kindness and courage that echoed through generations. The ranch they built together remained in the family for nearly a century, a testament to what two people could create when they came together in love and respect. But perhaps the most important legacy was the story itself, the story of a woman who ran through waist-deep snow to save herself, and a cowboy who hid her and kept her safe, and how that terrible night became the beginning of a love story that lasted a lifetime. It was a story about courage and survival, about the healing power of genuine love, about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best ones if we are brave enough to keep moving forward. In the end, Sadie and Yates proved that love did not have to hurt, that partnership could be about equality and respect, that happiness was not something you had to earn, but something you had the right to claim. They proved that it was never too late to start over, to choose differently, to build a life that reflected your true values. And they proved that sometimes, when you run from danger in the darkest night of your life, you might just run straight into the arms of the person who will love you exactly as you deserve to be loved. Their story became part of the lore of the Colorado mountains, told and retold around fires and dinner tables, a reminder that even in the harshest wilderness, even in the deepest cold, love could bloom and flourish and last. That a woman's courage and a man's compassion could build something beautiful and enduring. That sometimes the person who saves you becomes the person you cannot imagine living without. And somewhere in the mountains near Victor, Colorado, where the snow still falls deep in winter and the wind still howls through the passes, the spirit of that story lingers, a reminder that bravery looks like running toward help, that love looks like opening your door to a stranger, and that happily ever after is not a fairy tale, but something real people build together, one day at a time, with patience and kindness and unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. Sadie ran through waist-deep snow to get away from the man who hurt her, and a cowboy hid her and kept her safe. But more than that, he loved her, and she loved him. And together they built a life worth running toward instead of away from. And that, in the end, made all the difference.